The Prime Minister missed a big opportunity this week to stand up tall and defend Australia's interests after a Chinese fighter jet set off flares near a Navy helicopter, forcing the pilot to take evasive action. But this was all Albo could muster up.
This incident, which we regard as unprofessional and unacceptable. This is unacceptable and it was unprofessional. This action by China was unprofessional and unacceptable.
Yeah, I'm sure Beijing is trembling with fear, quaking in their boots. Joining me now is Michael Shoebridge from Strategic Analysts Australia. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Is Labor too soft on China?
It's one word, yes. What they're doing is telling Beijing when the Chinese military acts this dangerously and risks killing the men and women of our Defence Force, our national leader and our Defence Minister won't even pick up the phone or see it as a crisis. What happened this time? We hear that the government made appropriate diplomatic representations. That turns out to be an official in the Department of Foreign Affairs making a telephone call to the Chinese embassy. That won't really have said, we think it's a grave issue when you try to kill the men and women of our Defence Force.
Absolutely, and as my colleague Andrew Clennell revealed this week, there was no minister-to-minister contact over this. There was no direct condemnation, and this incident could have had catastrophic consequences. What would have happened then?
Well, this is about the fourth time the Chinese military has done something when it's bumped into our military somewhere in the region that could have resulted in death. And, you know, the Chinese say, oh, it's because you're too close to China. Well, the Chinese military have done this off the coast of Darwin to a Royal Australian Air Force aircraft. They put their laser onto the aircraft, which could have blinded the pilots and caused it to crash. So when are we going to wait for the Chinese military to kill someone in our Defence Force before we pick up a phone?
Yeah, you're right. There seems to be a dangerous pattern of reckless behaviour by China. As you said, this is not the first time Australia's military has been put at risk in recent months. What does this say, Michael, about our China policy?
It says it's not stable. We hear from the government that they've stabilised the relationship between China and Beijing, between China and Australia. It is an unstable, dangerous relationship, and the Chinese military are acting incredibly aggressively towards our military, and we're not alone. Probably even today, the Chinese military have done similar things to the Philippines military. They've done it to the Canadians, the Vietnamese, the Americans, everybody they bump into. So you cannot have a stable relationship on economics and this incredibly dangerous security relationship. It's a schizophrenic policy from the government, and they know it's not working.
Yes, schizophrenic, that's such a great way to put it. Michael, you wrote in The Australian, under Labor's plan, our military will become less capable and less powerful between now and 2034. Why is that, and how big of a concern, particularly given the threats that we've seen from China?
Well, this is incredible, except it's true. So the new plan that Richard Marles released just a few weeks ago says we'll be spending $765 billion over the next 10 years on our Defence Force. But in that time, we're going to have less ships, we're going to have a weaker army, and we're going to have an Air Force that has to live off investments made years ago. We get a weaker military while we're spending $760 billion. So if it's hard to stand up to China now, it's going to get harder under this government's plan unless they change course.
Yeah, and it's just going to get worse for Australia given the threats that we are seeing. It's certainly a concern. Michael Shoebridge, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Danica.